We are moving to the topic of the day right now. Really excited. We've had a lot of water availability, which makes sense in our watershed, and we're really excited to have this. So today, our goals are to build knowledge on several water supply and availability projects. We're really excited to talk through all three. They're going to give us some high-level stuff since we're not giving anybody a ton of time today. I'd like to really understand those opportunities for synergies and opportunities to maximize impact. And this is the part that's a little different, but we've done it in some other ways over the last couple of years. But we wanted to give each of our panel participants the opportunity to use collaborative expertise. So we asked them each for 2 questions. They are in that agenda, and we'll get to them when we get to them. But what this means presentation-wise is instead of just clarifying questions like we also often do at the end of each panelist, we're actually going to have each panelist group go ask us the questions, have a brief discussion, and then go to the next panelist. And at the end, we hope to have a little sort of wrap-up time, seeing what we see between them. I hope that makes sense. And we're going to start with our first panelist. Sean, I see you on here. Sean Coates and Jessica Ahlstrom with the City of Bozeman are here to talk about IWRP. And we're really excited to hear the update on the water supply plan and where it is. And so, Sean, I'm going to turn it over to you. You guys can share the screen if you have slides. And we're really looking forward to this.
Hey, good afternoon, everybody. Hopefully you can see my screen here with the slides.
Yes, we can, Sean.
All right, let me go to presentation mode. It'll just be me today. Jessica's up in Helena at a conference, so I'll take the lead here. So I'll talk about the city's integrated water resources plan update. Basically what that is that is our 50-year water supply plan. Historically, we first implemented this plan back in 2013. There was pretty healthy engagement push on this, largely with the technical advisory committee at that time. But basically what this does is it informs our policy and practice. So it lays out our priorities in the city for developing water supply as well as our water conservation program. And it really is a document that we follow pretty closely. If you look back to what we did in that 2013 IWRP, basically what it said was we wanted to prioritize development of a water conservation program. So it's been pretty successful. Today we've got 5 FTEs that are fully dedicated to water conservation work. And if you look at the results of that program, it's been really effective. We're down to 114 gallons per person per day of water use in the city of Bozeman. And if you compare that to other larger cities across the state, the average is about 163 gallons per person per day. So it's been highly effective. But basically, this document also tells us how we're going to develop water supply in addition to water conservation. So I'll talk about that a little bit as well. So the progress we've made since 2013, obviously, we just talked about the water conservation program. We've continued to acquire shares in the Hyalite Reservoir. Our non-potable irrigation system, we developed 2 pretty large systems, one to irrigate our sports park and the other to irrigate our cemetery. And then that took demand off of our potable water system. We're in the midst of developing a groundwater supply feasibility analysis, looking to see where there's potential to develop groundwater in the Bozeman area or immediately surrounding it. Basically, it would be an opportunity to add resiliency to our water supply. We're all surface water sources currently. And then lastly, we focus pretty heavily on optimization of our existing supplies and infrastructure. We've had a pretty heavy investment over the last, especially 5 years, in replacing water pipe, and we've increased our investment in that area. So we're up to about $2 million a year in investment in just replacing water pipe and keeping those pipes from leaking. We do have a lot of pipes that are basically over 100 years old in our system right now, so we're working to replace those. So realized and projected supply expansion. So basically since 2013, we've added 1,334 acre feet of water to our water supply portfolio since that time. Our projected supply expansion, we're anticipating just a little over 1,500 acre feet of water over the next 5 years of our capital plan. Realized water savings from our water conservation program since 2013. Just about 1,600 acre feet of water, projected savings through conservation over the next 5 years with our program at about 1,000 acre feet. So why update the IWRP now? So first and foremost, there's a big conversation in the community around water. So that is a big part of this, is just to have the conversation. If you look at our investment in the IWRP update, you'll actually find that it's a heavier investment in the outreach portion than it is the actual engineering. So pretty healthy effort just to do that community outreach piece. And we've got a number of folks on the call today that are a big part of that. So project scope, I just referred to our committee. We've got a water advisory committee, and that's broken up into two subcommittees. One is a technical subcommittee and one is a public advisory committee. So the public committee is a little bit more of a layperson's committee. So basically what we're doing with that is we're going back through all of our menu of options for water supply alternatives, as well as water conservation work. And then we're asking the committees to weigh in on those options, provide criteria for ranking, and then ultimately rank those options. And then lastly, basically take those recommendations that come from those two committees and provide a recommendation to the City Commission for final adoption of an update to our 50-year water supply plan. So really appreciate the work those committees are doing. That's a pretty heavy lift. We are having those committee meetings monthly. We've had, I think, 5 to date with our technical advisory committee and 3 to date on our public advisory committee. And those are, about a couple hours each and even longer in some cases. So pretty healthy time investment from the committee members, as well as homework associated with those meetings. So really appreciate the committee members on the call, and hopefully you can jump in at some point here during the conversation and kind of weigh in on your experience of that. Project scope. So after we get through this initial work with committees, and the committee work will be ongoing through the whole project, but we're close to expanding that discussion out to the larger community. There will be basically a program element set up on the city's Engage Bozeman page with project updates, FAQs, surveys, and meeting recordings and minutes. That will expand out into community events to share the information we've been working with the committees, and then gather input. And then lastly, we'll be hosting community open houses for the public. So I know that was short and sweet. There's a lot to that, obviously, that we won't get to in this amount of time, but thank you for the opportunity to talk about it. And we got a lot of smart folks here to talk about the 50-year water supply.
Great. Thank you so much, Sean. And Sean, I just put the 2 questions that you put together in chat so everybody can see it. And maybe we can stop sharing and give me a better shot at seeing who has thoughts on these. And folks, we can discuss these in 2 ways. I'll read them too. But you can either use your React, which is the heart, confusingly enough. And again, if you hit it, there's a raise hand, which brings you to the top, or unmute and we can talk. We're a small enough group that we can do it. So the first question that we were asked, and again, this is in the agenda as well, but what criteria or priorities are important to consider as Bozeman evaluates water supply alternatives? Yeah, Lily.
Yeah, I'm just gonna get grease some wheels here. So looking at everybody else, I'll just get us started. I was wondering about thinking about the impact, like as we consider conservation measures or new supply, sources of new supply, considering the impact to surface water flow. And how does that play in? And yeah, can that be a criteria to consider? I think about like fixing leaky pipe, for example.
Yeah, Sean, and I don't know if you have any immediate or you're just hoping to take information in at this site at this stage.
Largely open to take information in, but I would add just a little bit of context there. I think that's a really important question that Lily brings up. If you look at the Montana Climate Assessment, it basically is saying that, with the higher temperatures, we'll have smaller snowpacks. And so we lose the storage associated with those snowpacks that are diminishing. And so it becomes a priority to find replacement storage so that we can maintain those surface water flows. So, it is important to look for storage options. There are a number of options that are being considered by the advisory committees now. One of them, for example, is aquifer storage and recovery. Acquire additional shares in the Hyalite Reservoir. How do we optimize the Hyalite Reservoir? Those types of question marks. Another one is, how do we create storage, especially focused on natural storage and some of the drainages, like the sourdough drainage, for example. There's this concept of beaver dam analogs where you can slow down the water, basically the peaking that comes off the drainage. So, I think there's that's a critical element to consider. How do we optimize storage so that we can maintain those surface water flows?
Great. I'd love to hear from others. And again, any kind of on that first question, still criteria or priorities that are important to consider as Bozeman evaluates water supply alternatives.
Here, I'll throw another one at you, Sean. Oh, and Megan's got her hand raised. Okay, good. Here, I'm gonna go since I'm talking. Yeah, I'm interested about how to take into consideration like the criteria of how local that supply is. We've talked about the pipeline to Canyon Ferry and sort of if that can influence the ranking of sort of staying within our watershed and versus looking outside.
Yeah, and that's looks like there's a hand up there, so I'll defer to that.
Yeah, but thank you. Yes, so another criteria to consider as you're balancing everything. Megan, you've got an idea.
I don't know that it's necessarily an idea, but just to throw it out there, we do have some layers, mapping layers in our future land use map. So one is where there's known elevated higher levels of nitrate in groundwater. And then we also have what's meant to be essentially, these are things that are supposed to be like a heads up to developers that are looking at how they might want to use their property, areas with high potential for groundwater recharge using infiltration that are adjacent to ditches. So in terms of things outside of the city boundaries, I don't know if that is already being considered or might be useful in some way, but just throwing it out there.
Great, thank you. And thank you also for segueing into the second part was opportunities for collaboration. Yeah, thanks, Megan. Anybody else on criteria or priorities? Yeah, Matt.
Hey, Karen, I just a little bit of spin off from Lily's comment. I was typing away in the chat as she mentioned that too, because that one's been a big curiosity of mine too with the pipeline from Canyon Ferry. I think, costs, of course, would be a major, criteria in selecting an alternative, I would think. And, a project of that scale, who would fund that? Are there alternative sources of funding possibly, or would that ultimately be passed on to the, city ratepayers? You don't have to answer now, Sean.
Yeah, I think I can talk on a few high points on that, and you're absolutely right. Cost is a huge criteria, and that's one that's certainly in discussion with the committees. When you talk about a regional water supply project like that, it's not one that you do without a whole bunch of partners, basically setting up a water authority. If a project like a Canyon Ferry project were to happen, you would have to build those partnerships up basically in a way that everybody along that pipeline would benefit from it. It wouldn't just be the city of Bozeman, and you don't see a project like that go without quite a bit of federal funding support. So, and that's something that develops over a long period of time. That's really a 2-decade long project if you're going to try to pull something like that off. So it takes a huge amount of coordination work to get to that point. What I will say is, if you look at the benefit side of a project like that, the Bureau of RAC has indicated that there's 300,000 acre feet of water available in Canyon Ferry. And to give a comparison point, the city of Bozeman used 7,100 acre feet of 24. So it gives you a sense that there's actually quite a bit of water available in that storage. And not only that, but storage is a little bit of the gold standard because it offers a climate resiliency element to it as well.
Cool, thank you.
Great, thanks. Yeah, and others, and we're definitely moving into kind of talking about both those criteria and priorities, but opportunities for collaboration or shared benefit for new supply and resiliency. So anybody feel free. And oh, great, Susan, you want to unmute yourself and add kind of your thought here?
Yeah, I've been talking to Kevin Haggerty, and he's familiar with the city's efforts to drill some wells out by the sports park in order to see if there is a source or enough of a source of groundwater there to tap into for more water for Bozeman. And as I understood it, he has the data from it, but they did not get the volume that they were hoping for. They were hoping for a river rock at 1,000 gallons a minute or whatever that River Rock has, but that seems to be a one-off when you get further east in the sports park. Also, that was a big investment to drill those wells, and to drill those wells, they found out they were lower than the geothermal wells that are heating the school. And actually, when they pumped them to see how much volume they could get, it drew down the wells that were supplying the geothermal system. So, I mean, I am not the expert on the data, but you'd have to talk to Kevin Haggerty about the data. So I don't know how viable groundwater pumping would be to get the city of Bozeman extra water. And in terms of Four Corners Water and Sewer, Kevin says they've gone 700 feet underground at Four Corners, and the only viable water to support the Four Corners Water and Sewer and Utility Solution is at 65 feet. And he's worried that pollution of that at a relatively shallow depth, or even, that if that fails at 65 feet, there's nowhere else to go. So these are just some concerns that if you're really looking at a groundwater source to supplement your surface water sources, are they really viable?
And Sue, are you saying I just want to make sure I understand. So, one thing that could influence viability is if the source is polluted. Is that one of the ones you're saying?
On Four Corners Water and Sewer, particularly because the lagoons are next to the river south of Four Corners. On that particular one, that would be a problem, if they broke. On the sports park, it's more of an issue of um, you are not getting the volume you anticipated. And if you go lower, then you are undercutting the geothermal heating system, because the drawdown in those wells that are supporting the geothermal system are affected when they try to pump, say, maximum from lower than that. And I don't remember, I think Sean probably knows how much they spent on that project to see, but as I understood it, the results were only like 100 or 200 gallons a minute instead of 1,000. So I mean, this
So,
is
yeah. Yeah, so Sue, I hear you saying you're concerned about the interactions with other wells, including geothermal. Definitely some interactions with water quality, and then of course, sort of that cost benefit of prospecting for more water. Is that about right? And Sean, do you hear other things out of it or had anything additional as you were hearing this?
Yeah, I think Susan hit the nail on the head in a few of those areas. We didn't get as much water as we would hope to out of the test well that we drilled at the sports park. We were able to basically get a sustainability level of about 200 gallons per minute. We're hoping for a larger well, like Susan said, about 1,000 gallons per minute. So it's, I don't know if the juice is worth the squeeze to actually construct the full-blown municipal well at that location. So we are in the process now of looking for another well location that would be a higher producer.
Mm-hmm. So
and it would
really,
also have to be backed up, because again, any of that is backed up. Again, how much recharge you're getting out of the roughly 800 CFS that's being distributed across that area between Jackrabbit and the city of Bozeman from irrigation ditches. If you remove all the ag and there's no demand to have water flowing in those ditches, then how does that affect the recharge that you already are, expecting to get, because you've always gotten it before? So I'm just saying that to develop groundwater sources to supplement Bozeman surface water sources, uh, it's not
yeah.
as simple. It's going to be a challenging thing, and maybe not as good as you'd hope.
Yeah, thanks, Suze. I really appreciate it. And Matt brought it up across basins. There's a lot of intricacies on these. Anybody else have things you'd like to contribute to think about to help think about this process with either the criteria and priorities, or I'd really like to move, are there places we're definitely hearing about places where maybe we need to consider the friction, but are there also places where there's collaboration or shared benefits for new supply development or resiliency projects?
I have a question. Don't have the right, the answer, but I'm trying to figure out, like, how do we consider, we haven't fully flexed into our legally appropriated water. Is that right, Carrie? Right, we're sort of appropriated 5 times over, and if everybody were to like fully use those allocations, the Gallatin River would be dry, several times over. And so what is that? How do we take that into consideration as Bozeman grows? Like, what is that? How do we turn that into a criteria of, like, as Bozeman flexes into that legal allocation, how does that sort of affect the full watershed? I don't know what the criteria is. Carrie, help.
Yeah. I was just going to say a lot of the city's water is coming out of the East Gallatin side, not the West. And the West is what's appropriated the 5 times over. We haven't actually, I don't know, Jack or any of the hydrologists could correct me. We haven't done the math on the East lately. It doesn't have a commissioner. It's not quite as quite as contentious. Obviously, the city's wastewater contributes a lot. There's the other side of all the considerations is the wastewater contribution to flow and wastewater treatment methods are always a hot topic also when it comes to the city because of that reason. But yeah. But because it is a closed basin, any new groundwater development does have to mitigate that effect to any connected surface water. So that is something that is built into our permitting process.
Gallatin water going into East Gallatin from irrigation.
Yeah. Anyone else? Especially thinking about some of those resiliency projects. Anybody have anything immediate that they want to sort of throw in the pot? And we appreciate that this is a process, Sean. This isn't our only day and time to think of something.
I was just going to say, I know resiliency projects can probably look a lot of different ways, but just keeping in mind that if there's an element of protection or restoration of wetland or riparian function, there could be funds in 319 or some of DEQ's other funding mechanisms that could be synergistic.
That's a
Yeah, and
great point. Go ahead, Lily.
Oh, just wondering, since we got Sale and Danica on the call, I know.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I was just
there she is.
I
Yeah.
was just gonna chime in after Tori. And I don't I'm a little bit worried about putting the cart before the horse here. And I'm sitting with Catherine Berry. We're at a conference in Helena, so sorry if our acoustics aren't quality. But House Bill 932, I believe, just passed with a huge allocation of funding for pilot storage projects. And it's still very much under discussion about what constitutes a pilot storage project and when those funds will come online and what scale of projects those funds will sort of be dedicated for. There's sort of a ongoing discourse about the value of starting to allocate those funds sooner in smaller proportions or waiting till that pot of money grows and grows and funding larger scale projects that might be a little bit more compatible with something like trying to increase storage for the city of Bozeman. And as Tori said, resilience is a big umbrella word, but most certainly increasing storage increases resilience to low water years. So I think those things really go hand in hand. But yeah, I guess TLDR, there were some legislative packages that have opened up some potential funding around the idea of storage, and the scale could potentially be a pretty good fit for something as large as this.
And Sale, remind me, was that going to be about $4 million a year for the state? It looked like out of that endowment fund.
So there were two, good memory, Karen. So the $4 million a year is from the marijuana tax fund.
Okay,
so
thank you.
The taxes from marijuana sales. So it was funny this morning in one of the talks, someone was like, keep smoking Montana. So take that as you will. But then there's another bill and another pot of money that has $100 million in it for 90% is being allocated for state water and of interest, 90% of the annual interest and 10% of the annual interest is being allocated for pilot storage projects. So there's sort of two separate pots of funding, all directed toward basically improving infrastructure that relates to water storage, whether it's existing state water projects and making sure things like high hazard dams are being really well taken care of, or thinking about new pilot projects and what it might look like to try to capture more water in high mountain lakes or aquifer recharge efforts, or all sorts of things. And as I said, those discussions are very much ongoing. So I am a little out over my skis, unable to tell you specifically what they're looking to fund, but hopefully we'll get clarity on that in the coming year.
Great. Thank you. And Danica, thank you in chat. It's always Yeah, that bill by the time it got passed is a monster. So thanks for putting that in there. Okay, anybody else on, thinking especially about those collaboration or shared benefits opportunities that you've been thinking about? And again, appreciate the DNRC's folks, appreciate you going next, but also appreciate your kind of extra expertise on this call too.
I think maybe one thing to add is when we say water storage, like Sale was saying, that could mean a lot of different things. And so not all water storage is created equal for its sort of mutual benefits. And so hoping to that comes into consideration when considering the that's redundant consideration when looking at the different storage options.
Great.
Yeah,
Thank
just
you.
to chime
Yeah,
in one
Sale.
more time. Sorry, but I think that, Lily, that's a really important point and something that has come up a lot in drought planning world at local level and regional scales, and thinking about large big ticket solutions and sort of the converse of death by 1,000 cuts, but solutions by 1,000 efforts. So yeah, I think there's definitely room to explore things at the scale of the bill that Danica just shared in the chat. But, Tori alluded to the idea of riparian restoration projects, and a lot of little things really do add up too.
Great. Thank you. Sean, I hope this was of some help today to you to get a little bit of ideas.
Yeah, it was very helpful. You probably could see me writing a bunch of notes as we've been talking, but thank you, everybody.
Yeah, thank you so much for coming. And Sean, I know you've got the process. We have put the engagement process, and I know quite a few people on this call are also on your committees. Is there anything else that you would like us to be following so we can help by providing kind of technical expertise and ideas as you go through the process?
Yeah, and I would say, don't hesitate to reach out to the committee members. GWC has a committee member on it. Holly's been doing great work there. So please don't hesitate to reach out to Holly to provide that input through the committee, as well as Danica. Danica's on that committee as well. Again, really appreciate all of their efforts because it is an effort. I mean, it's a time commitment. There's no doubt about it. So, and Becca's on the call as well. So she's another one that you can reach out to and feed input into that advisory committee process. And then there's also going to be a follow-on process, and you'll be able to keep pace with it on the Engage Bozeman website. That's our main public engagement page. And we're going to kick that off formally here in November to start that larger community push. So, there are going to be multiple opportunities to weigh in on that process.
Great. Thanks, Sean. And just so you know, Sean, we do record these. We will have notes. So there'll be some backup. And I know you may have to jump off early because I think there's some things in the next couple panelists that might have some crossover with some of the things you're thinking about. So we'll have those as well for you, as well as everybody on the collaborative. And Sean, thank you so much. I know we've been doing a lot of water supply, and we've been leaning on you pretty hard lately. So thank you again for coming, and we really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you. So next up, yeah, we really appreciate it. And next up, we're going to do DNRC. And folks, I hope I'm going to get everybody, but honestly, I'd like to make sure to honor all of you. We're really excited about this project. This has been on the collaboration's wish list since the inception of the collaborative. So, but we have, I'm going to read who's on my list, and I'm not exactly sure who is presenting. So please forgive me and correct me as we can. But we've got Danica Holmes, David Saba, Melissa Brickle, and Todd Blythe to talk about DNRC and water budget for this watershed. We're really, really excited to hear your presentation. And if it works for you, we're going to do the same strategy again, have you present. I'll stick those questions again in chat and we'll have a discussion. So I'm going to turn it over to you. Thank you.
Great.
David,
Thanks, Kara.
it looks like we're looking at your screen, right?
Hopefully. Yeah, just to introduce myself. My name's David Saba. Excuse me. I'm with the Water Sciences Bureau up here in Helena. I'm a hydrologist. And this is really the launch of our Gallatin River Basin study. So I'm just going to take you through real quick, high level what we were planning to do and go from there. So before we do that, just if you weren't sure who we are the Water Sciences Bureau, working within our Water Resources Division. And most of what we do is provide technical services to not only the other bureaus within water resources, but also public stakeholders, right? In addition to that, we update methods relating to water rights in accordance with best practices. We do all of the groundwater permitting analysis. We have a very robust stream gauging program statewide, almost 100 stream gauges actively maintained. In an ideal world, what we do would influence policy, ideally, and then kind of wrapping around in full circle, addressing areas of concern relating to water use and water availability. So what we're planning to do is make a water budget model for the entire Gallatin Basin. So it'll be a daily time step model covering the whole basin, but at a very, very high resolution. So still capturing, the field scale, tributary and reach scale as well. And then when I mean water budget, I mean, calculating all our ins and outs of the basin, right? How much water received from precipitation, how much is being routed through our streams and canals, water losses from irrigation, etc., or groundwater levels as well. And so how we aim to achieve this is kind of unique. So instead of using one model, we're using a series of physical models, right? A hydrologic model, a groundwater model, evapotranspiration models, and others. And we're linking those together through our own Python-based framework. So that way all these different models can talk to each other and, through their inputs and outputs, and give us a more comprehensive idea of what's going on or how water is being routed basin-wide. And I think most importantly, once this model's built, calibrated, it's not something we're going to run once, stick on a shelf somewhere, and not look again. This will be actively maintained. The more data we get from our stream gauges, from lands or remote sensing, we will actively update this model, and so it gets better over time. And lastly, the model outputs will also be publicly accessible. We're currently in the process of updating and creating an online portal to view these model outputs as we create them. So I have a water budget model that covers the Gallatin Basin. What can I do with it? So we're being DNRC, we're really interested in using this to assist us in water permitting and also protecting water rights, right? You can give us an idea of these exempt wells are going to influence groundwater levels, somebody's water right, etc. Really big for drought planning, right? Once this model is calibrated, we can feed it long-term weather data, climate data, to give us an idea of what our late season flows are going to look like. Conversely, if there's a lot of snowpack, maybe we have a good 10-day forecast. We have that snowpack data in the model, our soil moisture data in the model. We can simulate what what our peak flood flows would be, giving us an idea, kind of that flood warning prediction. This better data can help us influence our irrigation practices, maybe elucidate areas of loss on canals. Again, tying in not really my purview, but water availability and quantity in our streams and tribs does affect water quality. Could be used for that. With regard to recharge projects, I know that's talked about a lot recently in the Gallatin. Not only can this help kind of predict areas to put recharge projects, but just day-to-day management, right? Because this model does track those that interface between groundwater and surface water and give you groundwater levels on a daily time step. Development and supply planning, how much water is available now, how much water will be available under different climate conditions. Hopefully we can tease that out. And lastly, fisheries and recreation, right? Do we need to make a call? Does FWP need to make a call? In place fishing restrictions, rafting conditions late season? We can predict that. So why are we here? I don't think I have to tell anyone the changing water uses, related to increased development, etc. within the Gallatin. With that comes water quality concerns. In addition to that, the Gallatin and what we do here will inform us on some of the best practices when we take these modeling methods statewide. So, a lot of the trends we're seeing with increased development within the Gallatin mirrors a lot of similar trends across Western Montana. And Gallatin's a great place to do this because it's very geographically diverse. We have our kind of pristine headwaters and our high use in our valley, lots of irrigation, lots of development, and then we can use what we learn and take this statewide. And then just because I can't unsee it, I totally think the Gallatin looks like a sideways Scottish Terrier. So maybe logo potential. We'll see. Has this been done before? Kind of. So we're just wrapping up a integrated hydrologic study for the Upper Yellowstone. And this was kind of our first big basin scale study using these practices. It won't be exactly the same. The Gallatin will be a little more robust, have more of a groundwater component to it. And then the results of this are coming very soon. So I would, anyone interested in kind of going more into the weeds about these individual models, how they interact with each other, be happy to invite you and have you come to that discussion on the Upper Yellowstone results. So right now we are in phase one. This is kind of the kickoff and our initial stakeholder engagement. Over the next year, we're going to be identifying where we need to collect more data, and then connecting with all of you to see what data is out there, what we have, what else we need to get. And we'll be doing that with our partnership with the USGS. And then, so after about that first year, once we've created that monitoring plan, we're going to continue to collect data to calibrate our models. And then over that time, building, calibrating them, making them talk to each other, which is not always easy, and then publishing. So overall, probably about a 5-year project. And then in your chat, hopefully, will be a form, over the next few weeks. If all of you would like to fill this out, I just have a couple of questions in there that would really help us just, kind of making sure we know what the primary areas of concern are in the Gallatin, since you all are the experts. If you have any data that you think is relevant, contact us. If you want to be involved and to what extent, let us know. And we'll take a look at that and go from there. And then most importantly, every high-level government project needs a good acronym. So if you could vote for your favorite project name, or provide one, a catchy one of your own in that form, that would be very helpful as well. And with that, that's kind of my high-level overview. Hopefully Danica has shared a PDF, just a one-pager kind of summary of everything I went over, what we're doing. And if you think anyone else would be interested, feel free to distribute that PDF or give them the link to that form in the chat as well. So thanks.
Great. Thank you so much, David. This was a lot in a very short amount of time. And Danica, thank you for putting both the handout and the survey in chat, and we can get that out again with the package for today's meeting to get as well. If it's all right, I'd love to turn over to DNRC's question. I did put them in chat. Maybe we could start and again do it the same way as we did with Sean in the city of Bozeman, but let's answer these, see what you guys think. What are some of the biggest water availability concerns in the Gallatin Basin? That I know you guys said broad, but that is a great question and we talk about it a lot. So again, feel free to raise your hand using the reactor, unmute and speak.
Here, I'll just say something that we've all been talking about over the last year, leading up to the legislative session and thinking about exempt wells. But I think one of my greatest concerns is having a user group using water that sort of lacks that accountability. And I think we've seen that user group growing here, like David was mentioning. So just making sure that we're all accountable for the water that we use and are sort of sharing it's a shared sacrifice to maintain, like steward and maintain that water. So I think I just worry about the exploiting the exempt wells and not having that same level of accountability that say a resident of Bozeman has or an irrigator has.
So really thinking about that piece. Others, what are some of your biggest water availability concerns? Yeah, John.
Yeah, I love hearing about models because I'm a hydrogeologist, and so we love that kind of thing. But I guess my biggest concern about a basin model is that our expectations may exceed our grasp. It's so difficult to actually calibrate a basin model like that, particularly when we don't know how much groundwater is being pumped for irrigation. We don't really know how much surface water is being used through the surface irrigation ditches. So I just think we need to be careful not to make people believe that model will be able to, say, for example, tell the city of Bozeman that it can withdraw 50,000 acre feet of water from the system because it's available. Because I just, I don't know how in the world we can actually measure how much groundwater is being pumped for irrigation, for example, or measure how much surface water is being used for irrigation through the ditch system, because nobody is really measuring that in any accurate way now. So this basin model, as he pointed out correctly, is that from a very high altitude, 30,000 feet, but its usability, I think its usability will be limited in the sense of what it can do to, for say, a municipality to evaluate whether groundwater is available for use, or whether we're over irrigating using the ditch system. I think we need to be careful about our expectations.
Great. John, and just kind of as a follow-up for you, I heard you really alluding to managing expectations, be really clear on what the best uses of the model is. And also in talking about gaps in monitoring, is that something worth both DNRC and this collaborative thinking about if there are some key monitoring pieces missing that as we go forward and iterate in the future might be worth adding?
Is that a question for me?
Yeah, it's actually a question for you because you brought up some monitoring stuff, and looking at their
Yeah.
second question, I'm wondering if that was sort of the part of addressing some of it too.
Well, David pointed out that this is a multi-year study and they're just in the beginning of it, and there's a big data gathering stage. And maybe there's a detailed plan on how to help the irrigators, for example, measure how much water is flowing through their ditches. Maybe they're going to set up some gauging stations, and I don't know what they're going to do, but it's a massive, massive effort to figure that out. And or to put flow meters on irrigation wells that are being used to irrigate for our, for hay and wheat, and all those are massive data gathering steps, and I'm not sure that's in the plan. David can probably
Yeah.
address that, but without that kind of level of data, the calibration is going to be very rough. It's going to be a rough, it rained 25 inches this year and we pumped this much groundwater and we had this much water flowing through the system and this much is going out at Headwaters State Park. And so it's a giant sort of very rough calibration. And I just think we need to make sure that people aren't having expectations that it's going to be able to do more than it will be able to do.
Thank you. And yeah, Danica, I see you've got a response and name for everybody from DNRC to help us think about what you are thinking about and what you might need from us.
Yeah, I think that that's well said, and we don't disagree, and it's why the collaborative part of this work is something that is really important to the study team. These ideas for or any ideas for who we might be able to collaborate with that isn't usually on this call, or other sources of data, however creative, like we want to know what those are. This is going to be a big effort, and it's really fortunate that that's not something that scares our hydrologists away. But the collaborative piece is central to making sure that that this project isn't developing in a silo. So those are the kinds of, that's the kind of input that we would love to hear more of. This form that I dropped in the chat that was put together is a start to it. So please feel free to save that and update it as you need, but we're here and open and ready to hear ideas.
And just I want to add to that, just building off what Danica said, there's a reason why our monitoring plan is going to take a year to build, and yeah, all great points that John brought up. But just like with the Upper Yellowstone, it was only possible because of our collaboration with water users there, with irrigators to help collect data. Really, you take ditch measurements. We had a full-time staff member that pretty much their only job was taking stream flow measurements throughout the Upper Yellowstone, just so we can have actual data to calibrate to, so our model isn't just another model. But yeah, all great points, and yeah, this is why we're here, to help kind of build this plan and kind of make this model as significant as possible.
Great, thank you. And Susan, I'm going to wait because I think Sale's on this point. Sale, you want to say something, and then we'll go to
just
Susan.
really quickly. The one other thing that I think David did mention, but just to reiterate in response to John's concerns, is that the model that's being completed in the Upper Yellowstone, the really amazing thing about that model and the one that's being proposed here in the Gallatin is the ability to use the scenarios that John was speaking about and sort of what happens if irrigation looks really different one year than another, or what happens if we have a really low snow year and our late season return flows are substantially different than we anticipate them to be. This model that is being proposed and is being wrapped up in the Upper Yellowstone is and David, you might have to help me with the right terminology, but it's amazing for running scenarios and for really being able to sort of toggle all of these inputs and outputs to understand how the overall watershed and system would respond in terms of what's available when. So to John's concerns, yes, it would be an enormous data collecting effort and lift, and hopefully the outcome will be able to address some of those uncertainties and really think through scenarios and put real numbers and real potential outcomes to what happens if we get much later or lesser snowpack this year, what happens if our irrigators turn on earlier or what have you. So I just wanted to add that idea of scenarios in, which I think makes it really, really cool and unique.
Great. Thank you, Sal. I'm going to go to Susan and then I'm going to go to Rebecca. Susan? Do you have anything on either your concerns about water availability or anything to address them?
The one thing you're missing is that every irrigation ditch at its head gate on the source or the river or whatever it taps into is supposed to have partial flume to measure the flow. And that is what the Water Commissioner uses to determine when to make cuts and how to make cuts in the system. And East Gallatin does not have a water commissioner, but the West Gallatin does, and so does Highlight. So consequently, it's not like it's completely unmeasured, but if you're an irrigator, you know that the flow depends again on if there's a sudden rainstorm up Taylor's Fork, and you do get flows that are not stable. So in terms of measurements, when are you measuring? Where are you measuring? Those are important things. And again, this is what the water court and the whole adjudication system is about. But the thing that's not being addressed in this or has not been mentioned yet is prior appropriation doctrine, because that affects how this water is distributed in this very large agricultural system, which underpins flows in the East Gallatin. When you have 800 CFS being diverted eastward from the West Gallatin River, it's going to get to the East Gallatin. And the other one is that Four Corners Water and Sewer is based on support from mitigation from Beck and Border Ditch. So the ties in to the irrigation system are not zero.
Yeah, no, that's a great point, Sue. And correct me if I'm wrong, DNRC folks, this is part of why you want us to fill out that form and continue to help add these pieces of information in. Okay, great. Thank you. I'm going to move to Rebecca and then Tori, and then I'm going to have to close because we are trying to cover an unbelievable amount of stuff today. Rebecca.
Thanks. Thanks, Karen. I just want to thank John for bringing up the idea of the monitoring the irrigation water. And I'm from Aggie, if that wasn't clear, but I wanted to, I guess, welcome the opportunity to demonstrate the irrigators' grasp on just how much water that they are using and how the records are kept. I think maybe there's an opportunity for translating those records, for example, translating miners inches to CFS, or, just all to say that I think a lot of this information is there. But also the opportunity to increase our understanding and make it more accurate has a lot of other benefits to the topics we're talking about, whether it's groundwater recharge or storage or municipal water. So just welcoming the opportunity to increase the understanding on irrigation water use.
Great. Thank you so much, Rebecca. And Sue and Rebecca, thank you so much for both the resource and the reminders on the complexity of our system. Tori, you had your hand up. I'm going to give you a last word and then
it was
we'll
just
move
a
to
super quick thought, and I'm sure that folks at DNRC have thought about it and maybe already done it, but is just reaching out to Alan English as a resource at the Bureau. He spent a lot of years at the helm of the Water Quality District and has spent a lot of time thinking about this, and I think even made a rudimentary water budget at some point. So I think he's probably got a lot of good information.
Yeah, thank you, Tori. Yes, we have. He has done a rudimentary one. Thank you, everyone. David, especially thanks for presenting today. Thank you all for coming, and we're so looking forward to this project. Sound like next steps are making sure that folks are filling out your form, so you're getting some more information about what's here. Anything else you would like us to kind of start continuing with as we talk through how to work with you and collaborate as this project goes forward? Anything else we can do, or some final thoughts?
Yeah, we'd love to come back. I think we're scheduled to come back in December. This is a quick follow-up to this, but yeah, I think like we talked about today, this is really like the first step of project introduction, and then yeah, this is really the time to get feedback, build a monitoring plan, find out your concerns, what data you have, and yeah, really, I think the data is a big critical component of not only what we have now, but who can we work with to help collect this kind of insane amount of data that will require land use, probably land access, and all these other things. So yeah, that's about it. Thanks.
Great. Thank you. This will be great. We're really looking forward to this. And then we're going to our last panel group today to talk about the DAMP plan. So we have Matt Johnson and Sandy Cole from RESPEC and Jeff Dunn from the WGM group to talk about it. And I'm the lucky person who gets to run the stakeholder meetings coming up. I'm going to turn it over to the three of you, and we're excited to talk about this project.
All right. Am I still muted? I'm still muted, I'm sure.
Nope, you're good, Matt.
Oh, good. Apologize. I'm not real used to Zoom. We use Teams a lot, so we've got a lot of stuff going on here, but I think it's going to work. Yes, thank you, Karen. And as you can see here, Karen is part of the team working on this. So apart from her facilitating this meeting, she had requested some other members of the team jump in to present. So like she said, I'm Matt Johnson with RESPEC, joined by Sandy Cole, also with RESPEC, working with me on this plan. And in addition to Karen, Jeff Dunn of WGM Group. So I'm going to get going here, but just to acknowledge, we're working for you guys on this plan development. So real excited to get this opportunity to talk a little bit about it today. Hopefully get some good feedback and continue working with you folks as this evolves. So really the challenge, I think we've been talking a lot about it already today, but Gallatin Watershed is experiencing rapid change, rapid growth, changing land use, climate impacts, and we all need water. And really what we need here is a greater coordination and outreach to inform and mitigate the impacts of drought and deluge. This plan covers both drought and flooding, too much water. So kind of the opposite of what we've really been focused on today. And this isn't new topics. There's been a lot of effort done to study drought and flooding. But despite that, there really lacks a coordinated effort throughout the entire Gallatin watershed, and how to respond to times of drought, times of flooding in a collective, coordinated way. So really the purpose of this DAMP plan is to really get folks to the table, communicate really what are these topics, what is drought and deluge, what are the thresholds, and let's bring this and bridge jurisdictional boundaries within the watershed. So we're speaking the same language. We want to also identify long-term mitigation and response actions that are going to be able to help build resilience to our watershed and to our community during these times. Goals of the dam. I already kind of mentioned that a little bit, but really work with the community and on communications and public outreach to increase awareness, understanding of what these things are, so we're speaking the same language, and really get folks in a coordinated way using best management practices. So part of this is stakeholder collaboration. You know, that's why we're here today. And like I said, we've got some meetings coming up that I'm sure most of you have been invited to. And really to develop a regional approach to drought and deluge risks and mitigation, and identify those long-term strategies and how we can adapt as a community during these times. So our focus area here is, of course, the Gallatin watershed, including the community of Three Forks. Like I said, we're working for the Gallatin Watershed Council, and by extension, the Gallatin Watershed Collaborative. This effort is funded by DNRC RDG Planning Grant, and graciously administered by Gallatin County. So we're collaborating with them as we move forward with this, and going to focus on the entire watershed here. So it's a big area. We're looking at these specific communities: Bozeman, Big Sky, Belgrade, Manhattan, Four Corners, and Three Forks. You can see in that watershed map there, I drew a little finger to capture Three Forks, but that is technically outside the Gallatin watershed. So this plan is going to include a drought monitoring framework. You know, what are some of the tools and sensors out there to detect when drought is occurring? Some mitigation and adaptation actions, vulnerability assessment. You know, where are the gaps where there aren't any plans or efforts or communications? We know they're out there. Propose some response actions, develop an operational and administrative framework. You know, who's going to be managing this and kind of serve as the ringleader during these times. Also on community outreach, like I said, just kind of educating public and bringing awareness to times of drought or flooding, and then develop a process to be able to update the plan as we grow as a community and as things change.
Sweet. Thanks, Matt. It's a good overview of what DAMP is and what we're looking to achieve. So kind of more getting into the meat and potatoes of what DAMP is targeting is what does drought look like in the Gallatin watershed? So some of the key indicators that we look at in order to determine whether we're in a drought or not are precipitation, temperature, stream flow, such as the Gallatin River and its tributaries, snowpack levels, which we can use SNOTEL data, soil moisture, groundwater levels, and then highlight reservoir levels. And on our right, you're looking at the U.S. Drought Monitoring Tool, which is a great platform that was developed. And if you look at like where the pin is, that's Gallatin County, which all of us are probably familiar with. But currently we're in a moderate drought, with some of the areas of Gallatin County also being abnormally dry, and in the lower southern part, more severe drought. And so this severity is in a 5-category scale, with D0 being abnormally dry to D4 being an exceptional drought. And some of these recent drought years include 2007, 2015, 2023, and 2025, which is this year. So now getting into the next part, the deluge side of the damp plan. So what does deluge in the Gallatin watershed look like? So to our right, you're looking at House Rock, which if you're into rafting or kayaking, you're probably familiar with that left line to the left of that rock, or the right one, which is a little bit more spicy. But that's a photo of, I would say, like late summer, like lower flows. You can see the rock garden pretty well. And then below that is House Rock fully inundated, and that was during the 2022 flooding event. So yeah, a lot of water moving over that rock. And so the 2022 flooding event, which a lot of us are probably familiar with, was a late season snowfall and Memorial Day weekend coupled with heavy rain. So that term rain on snow event is what we were looking at. And basically you have that snowpack, hasn't been fully melted off yet, and you have a heavy rainstorm that basically melts that very quickly and then causes the Gallatin River, for our example, to inundate. And so that crest was at 6.7 feet at the Gallatin Gateway stream gauge, which is approximately 9,000 CFS. Not quite, it was a little bit below that, but as you can see to the right, that one's at like 8,300, which wasn't quite at the peak. And then in addition to the fact that this was a flooding event, that year was also a severe drought. And so it's kind of talking to the damp plan and the importance of looking at the whole perspective, because it's confusing because you're like, oh, it's we had a big deluge, but oh, it's actually a drought year. So understanding the system that we're in is really important. And in addition to this 2022 event, the historic crest on the Gallatin Gateway stream gauge was 7.38 feet in 1974, which is a lot of water. And some of the additional years are 1996, 1997, 2011, and 2018, which in general, the frequency of these deluge events is approximately every 5 years, but give or take. So a lot more frequent and definitely a need for resiliency.
Great, I think I'll take it from here. Sandy, go over some of the desired outcomes and kind of the why engage component of all of this. So I think, we saw those pictures of the flooding. Some of you know I've been paddling for 30 years. I can talk about flooding around here all day long if you'd like. But I think the biggest piece of, why to get engaged is, it's an opportunity to bring this community together to kind of do holistic planning and take steps that really start putting the pieces in place that will prepare us for these events prior to the events occurring. So I think right now in kind of our administrative framework, we have reactive responses, particularly to flood events. So what are the steps we can take to do action ahead of those events to minimize the impact of the events on kind of the built infrastructure and the people and the valley? Drought, can come on more slowly. It can be somewhat more predictable in timing. It's a little harder to kind of work your way out of. So it takes, again, those kind of long-term planning endeavors. And I think the first two talks, talked about all of these tools that are being looked at, from, the aquifer storage to developing better water budgets. These are the tools that are going to drive the ability to make these kind of good decisions. So, these will help us identify those long-term mitigation responses. We kind of build that resilience into the watershed, right? When I say that, I think we think about, headwater restoration, mostly on public lands. Beaver Dam analogs and sourdough are mentioned. We could do log jams up all our forested tributaries. And this is really a large effort that takes up the community to engage in. But the tools and the opportunity is there for us to kind of commit to. When we get to the valley bottoms, Susan's mentioned, it's been brought up the complex irrigation network and how much water that applies to the aquifer. And that's a huge resiliency component to drought right now. If that shifts, what do we lose? What can we do to protect that as it is? And it is also a flood mitigation component in that those ditches can turn out and capture that water as well as kind of City of Bozeman and some other stormwater systems are routed right through that right now. So these intersystems are both interacted. And when we get down to those valley bottom locations, we're talking more like private lands. So this is going to require, you know, partnerships with agency or with producers, agriculture producers, as well as kind of the smart growth community planning components that we've been talking about. You know, with the 4 meetings coming up, I think kind of our plea here, kind of similar to David's, we're looking for data, we're looking for input, and kind of where I was started is we want to make this shift from this reactive response to proactive responses and start putting actions in place where the community believes, you know, that what we're doing is valuable, similar to taking care of your yard, taking care of your house. You know, you do all these things preventatively because you know that, you know, doing them once the incident has occurred takes more time and it costs more money. So building the kind of the community perspective and taking the role of everyone here as kind of water leaders in the community to kind of embrace that, take it back to their agency or their entity and see how they can disseminate and grow this kind of culture of water conservation, of drought planning, of deluge planning, and appreciation of the actions that are already taken, right? Forest management, agricultural production, City of Bozeman, you know, continuing to look for more water supply from municipal sources. So with that pitch, you know, we got the first meeting here coming up on November 13th out in the Gallatin CD, 2 to 4 p.m. I think it's a 2-hour meeting. It's going to get us out of the gates. And then we're going to have 3 more meetings after that we're going to bump up into a little bit longer time frame to try to get deeper into, get the feedback, make sure everybody's voices are heard. And those meetings are still looking to be scheduled.